Well, Tara, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you so much for including me today in your podcast, Andy. This is really a fun switch for me. I tend to be the one doing interviews and moderating panels, so I'm excited to be on the other end of it now and feel what it feels like.
Yeah, it feels weird, doesn't it?
It,
I
it
agree. I'd
definitely
rather
does.
I'd rather be on my side of the mic, but I'm looking forward to the conversation. We don't run into people often, at least, who aspire to be a project manager from a young age, and yet many people love it when they eventually get there. So, how would you describe your journey, Tara, to get to a project-related role, even before you started your company now?
Yeah, so I think my journey is an interesting one, but everyone probably thinks theirs is as well. But it really started about 29 years ago. I can tell you the date, Andy, April 28th, 1994.
Mhm.
I got to go to a Take Your Daughter, they are now called Child, to be politically correct, work day with my dad, who worked at GlaxoSmithKline.
Mm.
It's now called just GSK. And I have the picture. It sits here on my desk with me. At the age of 12, I was on the front lawn of the GSK building in Upper Marion, Pennsylvania. And I walked through the halls with my dad, and I truthfully, at the age of 12, thought he was the CEO of the company. Everyone knew him. Everyone knew him. He knew everyone. I've always known, we usually joke he's the mayor of wherever he is, that he always can engage people, but everybody knew him. I later found out, Andy, that he was the maintenance guy. He took care of the HVAC systems.
Awesome.
And now what I know to be equally true, he is just as important because he worked in the R&D building, so his job was to keep the labs running and their experiments at the exact temperature they needed. But in that moment, being with him in that day, I was enamored. My sister Shannon followed my dad to GSK, and then I followed shortly behind to GSK. And I joked early on they should changed it to GSK-Nestor, which is our maiden name. But for me, that's kind of where the seed started of knowing there was this space in healthcare and project management that I wanted to get engaged in. Then out of college, I was really fortunate. I got to be part of a future leader program at GSK where I rotated for 3 rotations into different roles. And really early on, I had this mentor draw me those purpose Venn diagrams, the what you love, you're good at, what you need, and what you can be paid for. And I started to look and I was like, wait, I like checklists, I like organizational skills, I have this planning mental model. I think I can add value here. And since that day, it kind of stuck to me. And I've been able to deliver really over 40 transformational projects. I've delivered 7 innovation incubators. And besides having a family and other projects in itself, and to be honest, even my maternity leave was an Excel-based version of a project. I have now pivoted from in industry to my latest project, which is Artemis. And Artemis really has been my greatest, most challenging, rewarding thing I've taken on to date. We are a women-led management consultant business. We have about 50 consultants, and we service about 15 healthcare companies, mainly pharma and biotech. In the past 4 years, we have grown to this size and we've really specialized in this space and found kind of this unique niche for ourselves. So yeah, my project management story is a bit of a family roots beginning. They've been this compass for me, surrounding myself with great humans along the way that also steered me in the right direction.
Oh, I love it! What a great story, from your dad to the GSK to the start of your company. What a great story. People often think of project management as a title or a career track, yet many people who attend our training courses don't have the word project in their title. So I'm interested from your take, what are some examples of how project management is often misunderstood?
Yeah, I think most people hear project management and they're like, oh, right? Gantt
Yeah,
charts, tasks,
right. Critical
deadlines,
path.
type A. Yep, critical path, type A project managers. And a lot of people think of project managers as like note takers, the people to follow up on action, managing just a deadline. But I think we're seeing this shift, which is really fortunate, and power skills are really being given the credit that they are due to be given. And that's where you see great project managers to shine. Personally, Andy, I think everybody should learn the foundations of project management. I think every human in life could, regardless of role, inside and outside, simple things. Why are we doing this? What's the goal? What are the benefits? Who should be involved? How long should it take? But I think why you don't see project manager in the title often is because of that reason of its evolution.
Mm.
I was trying to think of, okay, like what would you call a project manager? And I'm like, well, they're the team cohesiveness, they're the glue, they're the information silo destroyer, they're the mediator. They can basically hold two views equally and drive a decision. Peacekeeper. Some days they're the therapist. They're the person that has to read the room and know when to push and let the energy flow elsewhere, driving maybe your agenda off track that day. They've now encompassed change management, communication. They're the GPS, right? And the great part is we can actually do all of these things and manage so many different type of projects from short term, week, 2 weeks, to long term, 18, 24 months, because we have this combination of the power skills, but those foundational tools, right? That training that gives us the way to navigate through these scenarios. When you have a really good project manager, you realize really quickly you're getting more than a great note taker, and you take advantage of that.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's good. I want the word destroyer in my title somewhere. That was really, I like that, Tara.
You can add it. Put it in your LinkedIn.
I like it. I feel like one of the examples of how things are misunderstood is I feel like growing up, I was taught it's about hitting a date. That project management is just hitting a date. But, that's just an example of many lessons you learn over time. You can hit a date and not deliver value, right? So I'm interested in some of the important lessons you've learned about leading people as well as delivering projects.
Yeah. So I almost don't even put this out there, but 18 years I've managed projects. Probably even before that, if I'm honest,
Sure.
from young days, but 18 years of managing in company type of projects. And
Right.
I can confidently say, even the same project, if you tell me, hey, we're going to do this exact same project twice, it's going to look different every time. And there are two lessons and reasons that I've learned for that for me personally. First is, I like to think of projects like I use that GPS, above, right? You can enter the destination in your Waze or your Google Maps, and you're going to get to that destination. But how you're going to get there, one's going to hit the $15 in tolls. Do you want to take that? One might be a little longer in distance. Do you want to take that one? One might be quicker, but it's highways, and maybe that you don't love to drive on. One might be longer, but scenic and enjoyable. And then along the route, you're going to get rerouted multiple times. So be
Yeah.
ready for it. So think of it as you have the destination and there's a lot of ways to get there. And that's why these projects look different, and leading projects are always going to look different no matter if you take the same two projects. The second one, which I think is really the critical part for me and kind of goes along with your people and projects based podcast piece, is really the critical lesson is people, right? The most successful projects I've ever run is where the team laughs a lot. They like to be together. And creating team dynamics, it's not just luck of the draw. You can actually foster it. It requires effort and skill. And it is a true skill of a project manager. So I tell people all the time, I don't care if you're going in for a 2 week, 4 week, or you're going in again for an 18 to 24 month, take the time to make that team dynamic, because even that perfect project plan counts for every scenario. Think I've got every scenario. It's going to miss that connectedness. That's where a high performing project team happens, and you build that camaraderie. And let's be honest, we're all in the trenches together. We want to know we have each other's support. I've never looked back on a project and gone, wow, look at what I delivered from an impact perspective. I remember the team. I remember the laughter. I remember the pranks. I remember how much fun we had along the way. Those are the things that always remind me, is those relationships. So think about one, the project is kind of a GPS, multiple ways to get there. And then two, really take the time to foster that team dynamic.
It's so good, Tara, because one of my favorite hires over the years, he had this line. He's a former Vietnam vet, actually, but he said, because I think in the military, sometimes the line is no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. And he said, a project schedules the schedule for exactly how a project will not occur. Right? And isn't that true on a commute? It's true if you're trying to, go from where you are into New York City, something's going to come up unexpected. It's just, that's the reality. And sometimes people feel like they're a failure if they're a project manager and something goes wrong. It's like, no, if everything's going right, you don't have a clue. It's like, maybe, right? It's like, there's something that is surprising or ahead of us that we need to be aware of. So.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that context too, because I think you have to give some of that space to realize things will go off plan. And that is, like you said, it used to be hit the time and you were successful, but it's not anymore, right? There's so many different ways to be successful, and it's really evolved. And I love that. The time, scope, and budget, they're still foundationally important
Mm-hmm.
to kind of outline that, but there are just now so many other ways and you learn. And if you don't give time and space for that, sometimes you might miss the magic.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's much more focus now on delivering value, which I feel like early in my project management career, it wasn't, it was the time, scope, and cost. Where
Yeah.
what if we stay within those three legs of the triangle? Like this one company, I was hired to facilitate a lessons learned, and the pre work included, do you consider this project to be a success? And everyone in the pre-work said yes. And what I found out, Tara, was that not a single client of theirs had bought the product. But yes, we were a success, right? So it is often more nuanced of how I look at it. So there's so many things. Like sometimes people want to focus on tools, and tools are good. Sometimes people want to focus on frameworks. But I'm interested in 2 to 3 practical, specific management practices that you use regularly when you're trying to lead and deliver projects and teams.
Yeah, so I'm going to stick on the good team dynamics, right?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah,
said it takes skill and I think it takes time and effort.
yeah.
And the first thing I tell people to do, and when I kind of coach a team or talk to a team or start a new project, is get to know people as individual. I'm not talking about the icebreaker at the beginning of a meeting or call. I'm talking about get to know them individually, get the one-on-one conversations going, find out what makes them happy. Where do they spend their time? What are they like doing outside of this job? Because when they tell you something, Andy, they're telling you because it's important to them. I take notes. I have notebooks still, and I write down people's children's names, their upcoming events, their trips, their hobbies, important details because it helps me remember them, one, and two, to build the connection. I think it's really, really important to listen to people and actively listen and know you may not hold all that information, but you can go back and reflect on it. The other little thing I do is I set reminders on Mondays and Fridays, 15 minutes, that's it. I send notes of recognition, something that genuinely will help me authentically create and keep the maintain of the relationship, right? So sometimes I might find an article or a podcast or something that reminds me of someone I met within the week and I send it to them. Or just say, hey, I want to let you know I saw you today and I know you had a hard week, but you did a great job or whatever, something simple. It doesn't take much time. But recognizing the people's individuals, I think is the first key step to that team dynamic.
And real quick on that
Then
one, Tara, real quick on that one.
yes,
Is it you're not trying to send it out to 15 people?
no,
That reminder is
no.
just one, right? So that's totally doable.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Okay,
totally doable. It's
yeah,
not even 15 minutes, to be honest. It
yeah.
probably takes less than 5.
Right, right.
Um, but even if you know, like, hey, somebody's going on vacation next week, right? Hey, have a great vacation. By the way, feel free if you need anything while you're out to send it over to me, right? Those little things just to show you, like, I heard you, I see you, I know this is important to you. Um, that is, especially in this virtual world, extremely important to do when you don't get to do the water cooler talk that you used to do as well. So one, it's get to know the group, the team as an individual before the project is even, the focus.
Yeah.
And then I like to then take this individual piece and bring it to the team dynamics. So I generally will start each project kind of team kickoff with, I'm going to, for lack of a better word, call it a Facebook page. And I'm putting quotes around that, but it can be anything. It can be a Word document. It can be a PowerPoint slide. There's a really cool tool out there called Pop. That allows you to put in like, what are your interests? What are the things you like? So all those things you've just learned about the person in that one-on-one, you're now bringing to the team dynamic. And it's really good to start to kick that off on getting them connected to each other. I've seen people say, oh, you're going to this vacation spot. I've got all the best restaurants. Let me sit down and show you, right? And you start to create those connectedness and they find their mutual interest and things that maybe even they want to try out in future. I'll never forget there was one, and we had multiple people that were motorcycle riders, and I had no idea that multiple women in this group would have all been bike riders, right?
Cool.
Like it was a really cool thing to see. And then kind of a good reminder now when you kind of see things, hey, you have any trips planned, where send a pic of your latest spot you've been in, right? And during that, I also then talk about work preferences, communication styles, and what makes a great work environment, right? So then you have this open team dynamic of like, here's who I am, here's what I like, here's what I do outside of work, here's what I like inside work. And then you start to say, okay, let's talk about how we're going to work as a team, right? So I always say, for example, you send me a text, Andy, I'm going to be quick to respond. I've got 3 little kids. This phone is a lifeline for me. If you send me an email, that might be a little slower. If you send me a voicemail, Thank God for
Good luck.
transcriptions because I will never listen to it. Transcriptions have solved my life, right?
Yeah.
But I want to know, are you a best in the AM person in the morning? Do you like to go to yoga on your lunch break? And I'm not going to bother you. After 5 p.m., maybe you're taking care of a parent, right? It's this information that we start to say, okay, this is how we're going to agree to work as a team, and we respect each other and we respect our boundaries. And, if I have a late night email, I'm going to put that in my saved draft until 9 a.m. when you want to get online, right? It's that kind of stuff that we start to see communication environment and what makes great environment. And then my third thing I really like to do is make sure we all have purpose of why we're doing this project, right? I think a lot of people, again, we talk about the destination, um, but understanding you often have a like destination of like, okay, get this thing in place, right? But what is the purpose of why we're doing this ultimate? And I'm talking about the bigger purpose. And I'm fortunate we work in healthcare. So a lot of times we're talking about getting a medicine to a patient, right? It's always easy in the day to day to get in the logistical challenges of a project and forget about what is important. So if we all say, I am on this project and I have somebody who's been impacted maybe by cancer, right? And we're doing it, we're in the oncology space. Grounding ourselves in on that purpose of the project in the first place allows us to continue that common thread of our group values, what we're trying to accomplish, and we continually put that to the forefront when things get really tough, because they will get tough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's so well said. The POP, by the way, personal operating profile, is it? Do I remember that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
I
yes.
had not heard of that before I read your article on this. And is it something that's publicly available? Like you could send me a link on that one. I could put it in the show notes.
I would love to do that. And yes, it is. It's a small startup company that is trying to look at the dynamics of how do you foster great team environments. It's basically almost taking your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and all these pieces and dovetailing them together. And again, it's a simple way. It's an electronic way to show you pictures of you. And it prompts you to update it, right? Like, so it gives you these nice little nudges to say, hey, has this changed or what's coming up? It gives all of those personal working styles. Again, right? I get to say, don't talk to me before my cup of coffee, right? Like those things that are there and people can go, okay, I remember now, right? And they do it in a really nice, fun visual way, which I think makes it engaging as well, but happy to share that as well.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. Do you ever run into people that are more resistant to share some of that, by the way? And I'm just wondering, how do you navigate that when someone's like, I don't want you to know my social security. I mean, obviously you're not asking for that, but some people don't want to share as much. Yeah. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you have to respect people with what they want to share. And again, I come back to if they share something, it's usually important to them. I do think though, like the other piece I will say about what the challenging part of like humans is you need to also remember sometimes you have to build in that time to go off plan. So if you feel like somebody's being resistant, um, find out why that is, right? What is it in their energy level or what's going on? And build that time to go off plan. I actually tell my project managers all the time, which is something people probably don't think of, build in some space, right? For that. We're humans.
Right.
I keep like little list of videos. I call them like energizers. They range from inspirational to humorous that I can pull out when I see energy levels dropping. That kind of stuff starts to engage people that are resistant or like the lighthearted things, right? I'll use prompts a lot, like put in a meme of how you're feeling today. Somebody's going to put in that meme that's just going to have everybody cracking up and starting to laugh, right? And pull this discussion out. Um, and another one that I like to do a lot too, which I think is really simple. What are you grateful for this week, for today, whatever it may be?
Yeah.
And so maybe they don't want to share all the personal sides of them, but they might share these little snippets, right? And you start to get to see them and pull them into the group dynamic. Um, I just think on the surface, some of this stuff may seem silly. They might be looking like they're pushing project timelines out, but this is really how you keep people motivated, right? And laughter is a great medicine. Being human is hard. We're dealing with so many dynamics and we ebb and flow, right? So you have to go off plan. And when you deal with people that are challenging, you need to meet them where they are, build in that time to build that. And I always say you might just be surprised at how people perform after that. They exceed often what was expected of them. So take the time, build in the time to go off plan, meet them where they are, and just find little prompts and ways to kind of keep engaging them to see what kind of gets them excited. Because, yeah, everyone's humor is not the same, everyone's passions aren't the same, but you'll start to get little pieces that will help to open it up and bring in that kind of team cohesiveness.
I don't remember the company, Tara, but I think it was a social services company that we were doing some training at, but they had like a company mood ring. So in the morning you could just kind of log in with just where you at. And I don't know my mood ring colors well enough to know
I
what a
love it though.
blue versus a red or a white or a black would be. But anyway, I just thought it seems like this has maybe some potential. That we're not asking prying questions like tell us the biggest fear you have, or it's not necessarily it's just ways to find out what really matters to each other. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a really clever idea.
I love the mood ring concept. You're bringing it back to the 90s, how much
Yeah,
you
yeah,
like as a kid love that and would love to see it kind of return. And I
yeah,
think it is that stuff. I know like in some companies will do a question of the day, right?
right,
Like
yeah, yeah,
it's silly, right?
yeah.
But it brings in kind of that engagement and that
Mhm.
team camaraderie and you start to see pieces of people. And you're right. Some people might share really deep details. We're working together enough, you might, but some people might not, right? Some people might compartmentalize, but they'll start to give you some of those pieces. Um, and yeah, the mood ring one, that's pretty
Yeah.
funny. Maybe there might be a business model there for somebody to
There
pick
might
up and
be.
run with.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. A CIO once told me the source of his biggest joys was also the same as his biggest pains, which was people. And I know this is something that really matters to you, and you brought it up again already today. But what are some of the biggest people-related challenges that you or your project managers run into, and how do you coach them to navigate those challenges?
Yeah, I think and I feel like I reiterate a little bit what I say, but I think maybe it takes a few times for it to kind of hit in with people. But it is that, again, team dynamic, individualness, right? Getting to know people on that level, then making sure we create some good safe zones around how we work and operate as a team,
Mm-hmm.
and then truly looking at, how do you keep people motivated and building that time to go out plan. I really think um, people, I always say, we're not in the project business, we're in the people business.
Mm-hmm.
And the comment by that CIO, it's funny, right? Because somewhat it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you can really create a good team when you get to know the people, the team, the styles, and you're aligned to that vision. Doing these things up front, they drive value, they take time, and there's a skill set to them. But I think again, it's super important knowing that people are different. A lot of people also will talk about there's different, right? There's a ton of them now. The HBEIs, the Myers-Briggs. I mean, it was funny. I was just going through a bin of old work from when I started and looking back on things of like how I was categorized and what was said. And a lot of it rang true still.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Some of it was hard to read back on, to be honest, but some of it really rang true and it makes you reflect. And I think those things as well can be really insightful. I have a really simple one. It's called North, South, West, and East, and I'm happy to share a link to it. And it's just where would you plot yourself? And it's not super personal. It's more about your working style. But these really simple things that you can quickly go, where am I? Maybe I'm in the middle. Maybe I'm here. You start to see how people work. Then you learn how to bring information to them. And you learn how they like to receive information. They also learn how you like to receive information and work. Again, it's that people dynamic and kind of doing those 2 to 3 things to start to bring it together and getting to know people from an individual and then creating that team dynamic on top of that.
It's good. I can see how a lot of this is a lot easier to do if it's people on our direct team. Let's say you have a stakeholder that you have, let's say, zero authority over, not much of a relationship just because by nature of the roles we don't bump into each other as often, but they seem to be an obstacle. Now, the answer to any question like this is always, it depends, right? It depends on lots of different things, but can you think of any particular things that have happened, maybe even relatively recently, the way you've either handled a difficult stakeholder, a challenging stakeholder, or somebody who seems like they're an obstacle to progress, or you've kind of helped one of your project managers?
Yeah, so the first thing I would always say is use the zone of controls. I think people forget this simple process, which is looking at stakeholders of what can I control,
Yeah,
what can I influence, and what's out of my control.
yeah,
And if that stakeholder is going to be out of your control, you could keep going and pushing as hard as you possibly can. But if that is going to be out of your control, it might be a wasted effort, to be honest, at some points in time. The other second thing I always talk about is, and I am a big fan of a project manager who has change management experience, which is with any change in any situation, there's a dip and you can't skip the dip. So that person might be in the dip. recognize where they are, recognize where you are on the change curve, see if you can meet them where they are, because by each phase, there are different reinforcements and behaviors you can do to help people move through that. So that it used to be like stages of grief, honestly, which is sad to correlate it to, but change is hard. Um, and when you look at people from a change curve perspective, there's got to be the dip. You just got to know, are they in the dip, right? And then what can I do in the dip that's going to help them the best? And there's a lot of change management experts out there that can provide that guidance. But some of these things you won't be able to control and influence. So I think the very first step is like, what is within my control and influence? Is this a big, huge boulder that organizationally I can't change? But from a one-on-one perspective, find out where people are on the change curve. Start to meet them where they are, and there's reinforcements all along that way. Some people are going to dip longer than others. And the other thing I always say is usually with any kind of change or project, as a leader, even as a project manager, you tend to have the information a few steps ahead of everybody, right? So you've got to realize people are a few steps behind you and they need time to sometimes activate to that, right? So use really your change management practices at this point to really think about challenging stakeholders and that resistance. Resistance is good. Resistance is good. It is not a bad thing. Accept it and realize it's a good thing.
Yeah, that is not what I learned in school, Tara. But you find over time that resistance it's like a light on the dashboard. It could give us data. It could help us navigate our GPS differently. I think your advice about understanding someone's why, like to that difficult person, their behavior is rational, right? And so what's their purpose? What are they trying to get out of this? And even though maybe we don't interact with them as often, your advice about just getting to know them, they don't have to fill out a pop, but still we can find out what matters to them. I think a lot of your advice really applies to, not to oversimplify it, but I think it applies. They're people, right?
Yep, great.
Beyond project management, I'm just interested in your story, Tara, because I think I mentioned before we started recording that a high percentage of the people that go through our project management classes are women, and I love to be able to profile successful stories. So you've attained a great level of success already. What are some of the most important things you've either done, whether it was intentionally or it just happened, okay, that have just helped you be so successful?
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. I do think success is a personal lens. Let me start first with Artemis and kind of where we're at. A lot of times we get asked, what's the secret sauce, right? How have you, in 4 years, grown to the size in a hard industry and been successful? And for that, I'm going to come back to it so simple. And if you can't tell yet, it's people. The talent, our team that comes into Artemis and takes a chance with us, honestly, and they could be with so many other companies. The clients we work with that understand the value we bring. And talking about women, I saw a quote recently said, behind every successful woman is a village of women that had her back. And for Artemis, being a woman-owned business and really feeling, we have had so much great support from a village of women. I couldn't even name them all that have had our back and helped us, right? So that on the Artemis level has been really the success, is the people. And then when I think about my own personal success, it ties back to the story, honestly, with my parents, right? I had 2 blue-collared working parents, no degrees, but they had a work ethic you could not imagine. And they taught me what to really value in life. My dad had second jobs like paper routes that he got out at 4 a.m. before going to his job at GSK. He rode his bike 20 miles one way, rain, cold. We only had 1 car. My mom was a teacher, so she was teaching us what to value, the importance of education and manners. We didn't have extras, but we did have this small little trailer in Memorial, New Jersey that we spent our summers. And I learned really early on from them that the experiences, the value of time, and honestly, the value of hard work. I think people are always looking for this quick fix. Like, how do you do this in 30 days? Tell me how the key ingredient to Artemis so that I can replicate this, right? I think hard work is often, the key secret ingredient, and learning that you have to work hard, honestly. So my view, hard work, surround yourself with good humans, add in some fun and humor. And personally, I'd be remiss not to add health in there. And for me personally, that's the definition of success.
Yeah.
So yes, I think I feel really successful, but also a whole lot of gratitude.
That's great. We had a guest. They wrote a book called "Good Guys: How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace." But one of the things I remember from the discussion, they said sometimes guys will say yes or apply for opportunities, knowing they're not really ready for it, but it'll be a stretch. Where women might be a little more. I'm going to wait until I'm ready for that. And so I'm curious. Are there times where you said, "I'm going to go for that," even though it would be a stretch? And I'm curious if you've seen any of that trend either in yourself or some of your peers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think um, we had mentioned earlier in the discussion, I'm a big advocate of the work ethic and style and the ability to prioritize that I see that comes from working parents,
Yeah, yeah,
working moms in particular.
yeah.
I think, yes, I've seen it. But I also think we're seeing things start to turn a bit, which is great. And when you ask, have I ever done the and yes, and put myself out there, starting Artemis is a great example. I
Right,
mean,
right,
I am in industry, pharma lived uh, 15, 17 years in industry, grew up in this kind of corporate environment and decided to go do small startup.
right,
Um, we had no clue what we were doing.
yeah,
We're still learning every day what we're doing. And I'm learning actually that even these companies that are like 20, 30 years old, they're still learning what they're doing as well. And I think if you can go in with that learning mental model
hmm
versus like, I got to have all the pieces and parts already,
right,
you will be successful. And
hmm
to put your name in the hat, get in the ring. There's a Brene Brown quote that I love that's if you're not in the ring, like I don't really care what you have to say, get in
right,
the ring. If you
yeah,
want to get in the ring, get in the
yeah,
ring, right? So,
hmm
and I also tell people always just when they're always thinking about like, do I apply for the job? What do I do? What's the worst case scenario? You get
right,
a job offer and you have to make a decision.
right,
That's the
right,
worst case scenario. You might meet some great people along the way. What's really the risk to saying,
right,
yeah, let's
yeah,
let's put my name in the hat, right? So I
yeah,
say, if it's something you want, go for it.
yeah.
You might just meet an awesome person along the way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's worst case. I mean, that's like there's so many
Worst case,
good case. Yeah, right. Yeah.
worst
We had
case.
a guest who she wrote a book for women, but it applies to anybody. It's good things don't come to those who wait. Good things come to those who ask. And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying here. Right? It's if you see an opportunity, well, you can make the ask, and you can kind of see. And I think it might be more personality than gender, but I just feel like there's times where project managers, whether it's for our projects or our careers, we don't make the ask. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, and I always say that like you reflect on how well you support other people,
hmm
and you've got to also do that for yourself. But also, I'm even learning this in business because when you grow up in corporate America, you definitely have mentors and guide and people that guide you and advise you. But when you're in small business, it's a different world, and you sometimes the manner part you learn, you think. Is one way, but it's actually another. I had heard somebody tell me before, being polite is very different than being kind.
Mm-hmm.
And you always think, oh, I don't want to bother people. I don't want to be rude. I don't want to impose on their time. Well, listen, people will say no if they can't, or they won't respond to your email, and you've kind of learned. But being kind is giving, feedback, is giving, you know, reaching back to somebody along the way to help them up the ladder in the path you just blazed. So I think, learn to be kind, not polite to humans, and, ask for what you want. And the worst case, somebody says no, that wasn't the door meant to be opened.
Yeah, yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, how do you? I mean, you're a mom. You are working on intense projects. You're running a company. How do you find time to develop yourself? Like, what do you do to stay current?
Yeah, so I used to be an ongoing educator, maybe from my mom being a teacher.
Yeah,
Education was definitely a place for me. I went back for my master's, then I went for my doctorate. And then I used to do any certificates you could, and I was all about that educational component. But fast forward 3 children, right? And I've realized nothing teaches me better than life experiences, honestly. One, watching your children and watching how much they stretch and grow you and put you outside your comfort zone and flex your emotions from minute to minute. I think you can just learn so much about people around you. For me, it has definitely been within my family. And then this is one I think people would not expect a project manager whose job is to create order say, but I enjoy running into chaos to stretch myself. So I actually read one of your leadership blogs, and it was about running an experiment to treat each interaction as if it could be your personal best, right? What could be your personal best? That's really where I see the beauty in chaos. And again, I know it's counterintuitive. My job is to create order. It might even sound a little reckless, but I've always seen chaos as where greatness, innovation, the magic happens. And if you can push through that discomfort, you see the very best of humans. When you are forced past your limits, and the alternate to chaos has always been complacency to me. So even in my house, my husband may wish I could sit still a little longer. He definitely wishes times could be a little bit more settled, but being unsettled and chaos is strangely motivational for me personally. And I always think about why is that? I think some people run to chaos because they're looking for purpose. I actually live my purpose in chaos because I can bring my project management tools and my foundations and all the things that I know work to the table to help us shift and navigate through it. I always tell people my favorite part of a project is in the very beginning when everyone's like, we can't do it. It's never going to be done. This is insane. This is all over. But then you start to whittle away at it, right? And you start to use those tools to bring you there and you see that clarity. And you start to see the plan and you see it shape and evolve. And yes, it goes all different paths and different directions, but there's something about that space of chaos that I learn and I grow and how I really develop myself now.
I love it. I drive my kids crazy sometimes, Tara, because we'll be going somewhere and I'll go a different way just for fun, and they go, "Dad, this is not the way." I'm like, "It is today."
I love
but all
that.
of a sudden you find a little something that you wouldn't have expected, and not every time, but I think it is interesting that the chaos, and we know this in project world and in life, chaos can bring opportunity for sure. So
Yeah, you're teaching your children important life lessons there too, honestly.
yeah, they don't think so, but that's cool. I'll make
Yeah,
sure to.
they'll get it someday. They'll
Yeah,
look
yeah,
back like, you reflect back. I look back on things now with my mom and dad. Hey, writing handwritten notes after every birthday, all 20 of them, 30 of them. I probably didn't appreciate at the time. I appreciate it now a lot.
that's so good. And let's end with this because we've had a lot of parents who listen to the podcast. Any advice you have for working parents overall, but working moms specifically who want to thrive at work and at home and in every aspect of their life?
Yeah, so first, I'd like to say I don't give out parenting advice
Okay.
because situations are unique. What we value is different. And I remember being in the thick of like lack of newborn sleep and being like, "You're gonna miss this," and I'm like, "Please tell me this is not true. I'm not gonna miss these sleepless nights." And I'm gonna be honest, I don't miss the sleepless nights. But what I think about is what I wish I would have known sooner, personally. So anybody that kind of maybe feels they mirror some of my values, I wish sooner I let go of the concept of balance. I think every day is a trade-off. And what you need to do is make sure you're doing the right things at the right time. It's not an equal amount of time. It's not a balance. You have to consider the season you're in. For example, May. If you're a parent and your kids are in school and you know what I'm talking about right now before I even finish the sentence, you have multiple half days, you have multiple celebrations, you have graduations. How many pre-K and kindergarten graduations do we have now? What happened to all these graduations? I have no idea. We got one, 8th grade and 12th grade, and college. But now there's multiple celebrations and graduations. And my work life goes off the rail.
Yeah.
I have to let go of the guilt. You got to be kind to yourself. My middle child's name is Grace, and I think it's a great reminder. We all need a little grace in our life. The other thing I think is to remember your children see you. So when you're feeling your best because you had that great day and you hit your flow, they see it. But also they see, like you said, when you go off track, when you go off direction, they see the messy, they see the hard, they see the challenging. But this is teaching our children really how to be resilient, how to have feelings and emotions, how to navigate through them. And the days, I think what I've learned is when you failed, and trust me, you probably haven't, but you feel it. Actually, you're a good parent if you feel it, because that means you reflected and felt like something was off. Give yourself grace, teach your children another valuable lesson. And one thing, don't ever forget the value of a sincere apology. I think you can apologize, right, for what you didn't do right. And really the one thing I think about going back to that destination and GPS, ultimately we're all heading to the same destination. And if you're a working parent, many of our goals is to be a great working parent and be able to make sure that we're setting examples for our children. But I think the GPS example for projects is exactly like parenting. We're all going to have a different way of getting there. What works for one doesn't work for another. What one may value, the route that gets there quicker, some might want to take the scenic route, and that is all okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking of whether someone's a parent or not, but especially for parents, figuring out what boundaries you want to draw for yourself. Because like you said, success is a personal lens, right? So, but can you think of any boundaries that you just, generally speaking, I just don't, and then fill in the blank?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it's not a boundary. I'm trying.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I'm succeeding every
Yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah.
Being present wherever I am at that moment. If I'm working, I'm present. If I'm at home, I'm present. Now, there are times especially in this virtual environment, kids are home for summer. That dovetails. And I think you can have those breather spaces in there to break it up as well. Like I love to go out and take the dog for a walk. I love stopping to see how my kid's day is going, but trying to be present in whatever you commit yourself to at the time. So I don't want to say it's a boundary as much as
Yeah.
what I'm trying to live by.
Mm-hmm.
Even the little things like, put the cell phone to the side
Mm-hmm.
between 5 to 8, right? Like those are a few hours.
Yeah.
I fail often. I apologize often. And I still give myself a little bit of grace when I don't do that well.
That's good. And that's good at home and at work. Tara, if people want to learn more about you and your company, would you give us the website for Artemis?
Yeah, it's artemisfactor.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Tara Miller.
That is great. Well, thank you so much, Tara, for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you so much, Andy. This was an absolute pleasure.